When one thinks of major JRPG series coming out of Japan, one normally turns to Pokemon and Final Fantasy, with the occasional mention of small series like Persona and Dragon Quest. However, despite its giant reputation in Japan, the Tales series is often not addressed on the same level as its rival series, and one of the main reasons for this has to be the lack of spin-off games. It's not as if the Tales series lacks spin-off games, heck the series has more spin-off games than main series entries, it's the fact that practically none of them have come to the West. Of the 20 plus spin-off games, only about 5 of them have been localized, and of those, 4 of them were smartphone games. While Final Fantasy gave us the Tactics series and Pokemon the Mystery Dungeon series, Tales has for the most part kept all its unique spin-off games locked to the land of the rising sun. Thus today I want to break into the Japanese exclusive world of Tales spin-off games with the game that started it all, Tales of Phantasia Narikiri Dungeon. Now just a reminder that this Tales of Phantasia Narikiri Dungeon retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss, Black Liquid SRW and Echolocation. For as little as $3 a month you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. Unfortunately I cannot find much information on the development of this game, so what I'm going to say is a lot of guesswork. While it's somewhat of a forgotten title these days, I cannot understate how important Tales of Destiny's release was on the series. While Tales of Phantasia might have been the genesis for the series, Tales of Destiny was the game which truly established the franchise as a mainstay of Japanese role-playing games. With Destiny proving to be a smash hit game, the developers and Wolf Team looked to greatly expand the Tales series in a variety of ways. The first and obvious decision was to pursue another mainline title, which would eventually end up as 2000's Tales of Eternia. However, this would not be the only game Wolf Team would develop. Wanting to capitalise on their success of the Tales brand, the team would re-release Tales of Phantasia on the PlayStation 1 with improved visuals as well as a new anime opening like Tales of Destiny. While the PS1 remake of Tales of Phantasia would come almost 4,000 units short of Tales of Destiny, it would more than triple the sales of the original Super Famicom release. With Namco considering the PS1 port of Tales of Phantasia a success, the team would look at new ways to expand the brand, and their attention soon turned to Nintendo's successful handheld console. Originally released in 1989, the Nintendo Game Boy would go on to be a very iconic console of 90s gaming, with it defining the new market of handheld consoles. By 1998, however, the system was becoming outdated after 9 years on the market. Thus, to reinvigorate sales, Nintendo would create the Game Boy Color. This variant added a new RGB display to replace the old monochrome screen of the original console and was initially quite popular across all regions. Thus, Wolf Team decided it would be a great platform to release their first ever Tales spin-off game on. Developing the spin-off game would be a lot of the same members who had worked on Tales of Phantasia and Tales of Destiny, with Koshika Fujishima returning to design the characters, while Motoi Sakuruba and Shinji Tamura would write the music. Kenji Suzuki would direct the game, while Phantasia producer Shigeru Yokoyama would again oversee the project. As for the plot, writer Nonshin Shimen would be tasked to make a story sequel to Tales of Phantasia. With this new game being the first ever spin-off title, the team decided to tie this game in with a pre-existing title, and as the first game in the series, Phantasia made the most sense. Hence the spin-off sequel Tales of Phantasia Narikiri Dungeon was born, alongside the characteristic genre of dungeon RPG. Tales of Phantasia Narikiri Dungeon will be set for release on the Game Boy Color on the 10th of November 2000, approximately 3 weeks before Tales of Eternia would launch on the PlayStation 1. With Tales of Phantasia yet to see a Western release, it made little sense to localise the sequel, and hence Tales of Phantasia Narikiri Dungeon would remain a Japanese exclusive. Despite being regional to Japan, the early 2000s will see a lot of Japanese games get fan translations by gaming enthusiasts, and Narikiri Dungeon would soon get a basic translation done by Change V. However, the translation was put on hold in 2005 and never finished, so bear with me as I brokenly describe the plot of the game. The story begins a few hundred years after the events of Tales of Phantasia on a starry night sky where a star falls to the ground. You as a player go to check out the fallen star only to find 2 babies. Since you can't find their parents, you choose to adopt the babies yourself and raise them. While you can name the children whatever, I chose to stick to the default names of Mel for the girl and Dio for the boy. A few years later, Mel and Dio grew up and soon discovered they have the ability to wear costumes to gain the powers associated with those costumes, such as gaining magical powers when they dress up as a mage, or becoming experts at sword fighting when they dress as a knight. One day, Dio arrives home with a creature he found in the nearby mountains, and the two decide to let you name the creature, and again I just used the default of Kuru. Following the naming of Kuru, the two are suddenly visited by a winged woman called Norn, who warns the two that they face the doomed destiny and tells them to visit the half-elf Archie, who is the last surviving member of the original Phantasia cast. Archie is found to be hiding on top of a pink tower, and the trio of Mel, Dio and Kuru had to make use of their powers and skills to navigate the different levels of the tower to reach the top. At the top, the three encounter Archie as well as Norn, who appears again and requests Archie to test the three's skills to see if they can change their destiny. After beating Archie in a fight, the three are deemed worthy and return back to their house, where Norn enchants a painting there, which allows the whole house to travel back to the past, where they can meet other members of Tales of Phantasia's cast to change their destiny. And the story carries on from there and sees the three travel to a myriad of time periods, both past, present and future, in which they encounter all the major characters from Tales of Phantasia, who both help them and challenge them. As for the full story breakdown, the wiki page has a decent synopsis which you can read via the link below. As a Game Boy Color game, Narikiri Dungeon, as I'll call it from now on, is probably the most graphically inferior Tales game ever made. While the game still does a decent job with the limited hardware it's on, it's still a pretty poor Tales game visually, with areas and locations not being particularly distinct in design. Despite being a sequel set in the same universe as Tales of Phantasia, Narikiri Dungeon doesn't reuse locations much from the original game, as with Phantasia being a Super Famicom game, the Game Boy Color simply can't produce the same level of graphics. Staying on the topic of being able to replicate the visuals of Phantasia, Narikiri Dungeon lacks the traditional overworld seen in Phantasia, instead letting the player quick travel between towns in a similar vein to Door of the New World. The locations will change depending on the time period and the point in the story the party is at. Locations are split into two types, towns and dungeons, with your own house acting as a special town where you can time travel to the different periods using the paintings located in the room at the rear. At towns, the party can talk with residents and sometimes get side quests which can yield some unique rewards. The party can also shop for items such as medicine and food which can be used in a returning food bag. The party can also buy and make new costumes in towns as well. Now, the costumes are arguably Narikiri Dungeon's biggest mechanic. Heck, the Japanese term Narikiri literally means the act of becoming something else completely, which is what Mel and Dio do every time they put on a costume. Costumes can be changed at wardrobes located around the world, or by using the costume change item. Both Mel and Dio have a range of costumes they can equip, including a bunch that are exclusive to themselves. When a costume is equipped, the character's stats will change to match the costume equipped, with for example, the knight's outfit prioritising defense, while the mage outfit prioritises intelligence. Along with the stat changes, the costumes will slowly give Mel and Dio new skills. These skills are unlocked by gaining class points, or CP, for the costumes in battle. Each costume will max out on CP, and this will in turn result in the costume being mastered. Mastering a costume will allow Mel and Dio to equip more powerful costumes, which will in turn unlock more powerful skills for the two to use in battle. Costumes can also influence the attitudes of Mel and Dio, with costumes like the Thief making them more mean, while the Cleric makes them more sympathetic. These attitudes will also come handy when it comes to completing certain side quests. While the basic costumes can be bought at shops, more powerful costumes have to be fabricated. To fabricate these costumes, the party must first talk with this person located next to the shop counter. They will then, for a price, merge two of your chosen costumes into a more powerful costume. Overall, the party is expected to create and wear a whole host of outfits across their time-travelling adventure. Speaking about the adventure, the party for the most part will be journeying through a whole host of dungeons, hence the game's name. The dungeons consist of a bunch of procedurally generated floors similar to most mystery dungeon games, in which they must find the stairs to proceed to the next floor. Some dungeons are towers in which the party must work their way up to the top, while other dungeons are caves in which the party must work their way down to the bottom. Along the way, they'll encounter traps such as hazardous tiles and pitfall traps, which will drop them down to the level below. Eventually, the party will reach safe levels, which consist of a wardrobe where the party can change outfits. If the save room is just before a boss, the party will also have the opportunity to save as well as leave the dungeon in case they're not ready to face the boss. For combat, we have the Petite Linear Motion Battle System. Is that seriously what it's called? With the game being on the Game Boy Color, obviously several cutbacks had to be made. Most notable of these has to be the real-time combat system, with attacks now being turn-based. Despite being turn-based, the game still tries to act like it's a real-time combat system. It does this by again limiting the player control to just one character out of your three-man party, with the AI controlling the other two. This in my opinion is really dumb, as there really was no need for such restrictions, and it only results in you waiting ages for all the different characters to make their attacks before you can do yours. While battles can feel quite passive, you can at any time open the menu with B and manually assign your allies who use select skills as well as consume items to heal. You can also adjust their aggressiveness. Once it finally does come around to your turn, you have the option of making two types of attacks. By pressing A, your character will perform a regular attack. Meanwhile, while pressing A by holding up, down, or one of the side directions on the D-pad, you can perform an assigned skill at the cost of your character's TP. Once your character performs their attack, they will return back to their position in the party formation. The party formation can be adjusted in the menu alongside the characters being played. While the party formation doesn't prevent your backline characters being attacked, I did notice enemies will more often than not attack the party member at the front of the party, thus I usually put my strongest party member there. Going over to the party, throughout the game you'll play as the trio of Mel, Dio and Kuru. While I have extensively talked about Mel and Dio's abilities to learn skills through costumes, I haven't really talked about Kuru. Kuru is a rather unique creature who has the ability to transform depending on the personalities of Mel and Dio. While initially starts as a green blob, he will progressively transform into a whole host of creatures with a whole host of different attacks. Now this will probably be the shortest sound section I've ever done, as there really is not much to say about this game. As a Game Boy Color game, we don't have any form of voice acting, and the sound effects are about what you expect from a Game Boy game. As for the music, the game mostly consists of 8-bit remixes of classic tracks from Tales of Phantasia, like Take Up the Cross and Fighting the Spirits, which is, I must say, kinda cute. It even uses an 8-bit remake of the overworld theme in the second act to function as kind of an opening cinematic, if we can call a slide reel an opening cinematic. Besides for that, there's not much to talk about, so let's wrap up with my final opinions. So is this game something worth trying out? Well, if you're a big fan of Phantasia and are willing to deal with the fact that this game lacks a full translation, go ahead. Otherwise, this is one I'll probably skip. The game is very basic compared to its console counterparts, and if you want a solid handheld Tales game, I'd prefer recommend one tries out games like Tales of Innocence or Tales of Hearts R. While I like the costume mechanic allowing Mel and Dio to take on a variety of roles, the sheer jump in quality between the costumes cannot be ignored. While costumes like the Thief and Knight are solid costumes to use, others like the Dancer and Scholar seem to be practically useless and only exist to allow the party to complete side quests. Thus, Narikiri Dungeon quickly turns into a game of equip the Ulysses outfit and grind it to mastery in the same dungeon over and over again, and hope you don't die in the process since one of your party members is completely useless. Most costumes really don't give the benefits worth the long time and cost associated with unlocking them, and this is one of the main reasons I struggled to finish the game. I've also talked about my issues with the combat. While I understand why the game is turn-based, I cannot see why the player can't just control the whole party like in other turn-based games. There really is no reason why this cannot be done outside of the game artificially trying to mimic the real-time combat systems of the console entries, which, by the way, it doesn't. The result of this poor design choice is the over-dependence on the speed stat. Throughout the game, I always played as the fastest character in my party, as this was the only way to actually do things in combat, outside of wait for the faster characters to make their moves. So while I enjoyed the novelty of playing a Tales game on the Game Boy Color, I doubt this is a game that I'll ever return to anytime in the future. And after this game and Xenosaga Pied Piper, I'm very keen to get back to a modern HD game, so it's about time I get to work on the Tales of Xillia 2 retrospective.